really bad for us. He said, it is what it is, and we'll call you when we are ready. And when they were ready 4 months later, right? So I had to be in India for 4 months, from December till April of 2009. And that was really, really bad, right? Because we just had a new investor come in. We were ready to roll out sales. And suddenly the CEO is not in the office, is not thinking about how to solve these problems. He's back home in India, and nobody knows when he'll come back because there is no visibility into when the security check will finish, right? And I think if for nothing, the immigration has to be revised for these kinds of incidents. So that, I think this was a pretty bad occurrence for multiple reasons, because eventually when, so Tasso started running the company at that point of time, and he did a good job, but there were so many things to be done. We had to keep growing our customer base, build a product, and simultaneously start hiring, because we needed a lead, sales leader, a marketing leader, and so on, right? There were just so many things to be done. So that, when I came back, when I came back, we were behind on so many issues that just to recover from it felt almost like we were in a crisis. And I think we lost a lot of good momentum just by that circumstance. So another observation I had is after Series B, the company has grown. I think it's up to the founders to take care of employee activity, because some people we might hire who had equity low, but we need to pull it up. And sometimes we found this was a challenge to go get it done. So, equity is pretty important, because at the end of the day, Ranga and Chi and everybody gets rewarded, not on their salary, but on the equity that they have. Okay, so that happened. So then I came back from India in April, and we started hiring, and we were already behind the ball. So we went and hired some people, and we ended up hiring a couple of bad people because we were in a hurry. And they were good people. They were excellent individuals, but the culture match was not there, right? And I think we were not experienced enough to understand that it's not just talent that matters, but also a culture match must happen. But we did it, and it was pretty painful then until we got rid of it. So we had to make some pretty fast learning and recovery processes by then. So one thing that I really took away is it's very important to put the team ahead of the individuals, and keep building the team carefully. And the final thing I remember about that incident, about the whole period, is that we stopped celebrating our wins. Right? Suddenly there was so much work to be done, and we were behind the ball, and we were doing all these other things that we had to do, that suddenly we didn't have time to celebrate. And I think in hindsight, that hurt, not being able to celebrate with the rest of the team. So this in the craziness of trying to recover, I think we lost sight that this side effect is also very important of having a cohesive team together. So it is what it was, and so we kept building, we kept growing, we kept increasing our targets. The big data market started to recover. The market started to improve in 2009, 2010. It was a very good year for enterprise software. So we did well. And then suddenly, Tasso and I were discussing, and something hit us. Because if you remember last year, it was sort of a peak of a bubble, right? So there was a lot of good valuations going around in the valley. And we sat back and we looked at a contrast. How does life look in a bubble in 2010 versus a complete bust in 2008? It was dramatic how the scenarios had changed. And we realized that all kinds of signals get distorted when life is in one of these extreme scenarios. And it seems to a lot of people that any other place rather than where they are is a better place to be. Right? So if you are in Google, you are thinking Facebook is the best place to be. If you are in Facebook, you are thinking, why did I come to Facebook? I need to go back to Google. So it's all these kinds of distortions that are happening. They're completely irrational. They're completely incorrect. And we also had to face these kinds of distortions in enterprise software. People are thinking, why did I join an enterprise software company, and I would be better off somewhere else. And likewise, people, there were other people who were thinking the reverse. So I think one of the interesting things is, how do we keep a perspective even as we go through ups and downs? It's pretty interesting. So I would encourage people not to fall into this trap. So there was a lot of good work going on. We kept growing the company. We kept actually shaping the market. Big data was a word that was coined by our marketing team, and it took off. Analysts started recognizing us. And then a strange thing happened. Teradata reached out to us. They reached out to us in 2009, saying, we want to talk to you. We said, no, we're still developing the product and the market. And they came back in 2010, and they kept coming back because I think they understood that enterprise data warehouse and big data are complementary markets, and they had figured it out. So we decided that, yeah, we'll talk to them because it will give us a sales channel. It will be a good go-to-market with them. So the joint go-to-market talks went well, and then they heard that we were about to raise Series C, so they said they will invest in us. And they invested in us. Ultimately, conversations became so good. There was such a good market and product vision match, and more importantly, a team match. The kind of engineering and marketing culture that we have with them. That it was pretty interesting that we then started accepting that yes, Teradata could become our home. And that's what happened in April of 2011. We merged with Teradata, and now our team is the big data division of Teradata, as we are scaling and growing the product. Sometimes I think why did we like Teradata? I think at the end of the day, they also have a very deep desire to go out and win a market against companies like IBM and Oracle, who are 100 times bigger than them, right? And in some ways, it's from this common desire to win, even if you don't have resources. Which led me to a final observation that sometimes large companies are also good. I never thought I would say this, but certainly we have resources to shape a market, and they have good processes to handle customer escalations and a variety of customer rollouts, and it just feels to be good inside Teradata. I'm having a good time. Tasso is having a good time. So it is going pretty well right now. So an observation is, if the thing is right, large companies also make sense. So I'm going to end with two takeaways. One, I think starting a company is pretty easy. Don't stress too much over it. Failure is common. It's very hard not to have a failure. I think succeeding is hard, but recovering is the hardest. Hopefully, most people will never have to recover from the kinds of things that we had to recover from. Finally, I started the company thinking we'll make an awesome product, but I quickly realized that a good company needs 3 pillars to rest upon. The pillars of product, marketing, and sales. And you can have one of them and not 2 of the others, and if the times are right and the universe is kind, then good things might happen. But really, if all 3 fall into place, then we determine our destiny, which is a fantastic position to be in. So that's what I want to end with. That's my story. Lots of ups and downs. Lots of thrills achieved in the process of even small wins like a product release or a customer win, and the satisfaction is immense. And ultimately, the things that remain are the fun times we had at Bawa and things like that. So I think those are important parts of the journey. Thank you.
Q&A now, and feel free to ask any questions which you would like to ask Mayank, and obviously it's your choice if you want to answer. We will have Anand also on the stage, so he can tell you other things before he wrote the check. And Anand himself is a successful entrepreneur if you want to have another question. So before we open it to the audience, just quick question. So I'll ask a couple of questions. One is, looks like you are interested in computer science. I was reading some article by when you saw your brother writing a program to solve some buzzer towers of Hanoi or something. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, that's my brother over there, Gaurav. He had gone to IIT Delhi and he was in the computer science program there. And I had just taken computers in my class 9, class 10 system in India. And computers were a new thing, and we were learning basic programming. So we were learning basic programming, and Gaurav came back and said, "Look, I'll show you a cool thing. I'll write this thing that computes on itself." And I was pretty amazed. How the towers on Hanoi requires a recursive program. It was pretty new for me, and it was awesome.
So one more question I'll ask you, and then it's all audience. Was there anything like when you're growing up, which kind of you think there were any signs of that you'll end up starting a company?
I don't think so. I don't think I was thinking about starting a company or actually doing it. So my father was an engineer. I wanted to be an engineer. My mother was a professor in a college, so I knew I had to do PhD and those kinds of things. so that's how I evolved. But I think it was Stanford culture that put the idea in my mind, right? And then interacting with Anand on such close things, in India we think, Anand and Rakesh Mathur, and they must be superstars, and we can never dream of being close to them or learning from them. And then Stanford changed everything. We talked to David Shedd and we talked to Anand, and suddenly things seem possible.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll open it to the audience now. No questions? Okay, Dheeraj, can you...
Just wait for a mic to come to you, and then...
So the question I have is, you mentioned you talked about 60, 70 companies, your customers, to see how they would perceive your idea. So my question is, how did you find these myriad of companies you would talk to, and how did you get in touch with them?
So the three of us, we were very, we didn't have any shame in working our social networks, right? So we knew a lot of software engineers from people in my batch, people in my brother's batch, people who were in Stanford who we knew slightly because we went to TGIF with them, So every time we would meet a person, we would say, "Hey, do you know anybody in this company who's doing or managing a database?" Right? And most people help out, right? So if we talk to 150 people, 30 people will help out, right? And so they would just drop an email, and we would say, "Hey, we're from Stanford and we want to learn how databases are being used." And people would give us a meeting. They would take a call or respond to it. I think we were just unashamedly working our network.
Thanks, Mayank. Fascinating presentation. My name is Amit. I work for SAP, and I wanted to know your thoughts on Inmemory, because SAP is also doing a lot of. I think the problem that we are trying to solve is something similar. So, what are your thoughts? How do you see the space in Inmemory?
Yes. So I think Inmemory is a pretty interesting trend. Memory prices are cheap, and there's a lot of things that can be done inside memory. One of the interesting things is there are certain kinds of data sets that are not growing as fast as memory prices are dropping, right? So for example, there are only so many trucks you can put on the road at any point of time. So there's a lot of applications that I think can completely become memory resident, and suddenly the perspective changes for those applications. I don't think in-memory is a cure for every data problem, but I think it's a cure for a lot of good, interesting problems. So I think it's pretty interesting trend. Anand, to you.
But it's still different from what you do. So you see a place for that.
I agree with Mike. I mean, there are some data problems for which in-memory is good, and there are some other problems for which solid-state disks are really a good solution as well. So that's a new emerging trend as well. So those two are worth looking out for.
I think from the time you guys coined the term big data, it's now become a very standard term. We had a panel session here on big data for analytics and so on. So my question is, now that you're part of Teradata, do you miss not being able to do really sort of path-breaking work that you're doing at Data, and get sort of sucked into solving sort of more mundane problems within Teradata's corporate framework?
So I think one thing that Teradata has done very well is they have made us a separate division, alright? And we are working on our product plans, product releases, on our product schedules. So since we merged with Teradata over the last 7 months, we have brought out 2 minor releases already, and we are about to bring out a major release. Again, 1 major release every year. We're continuing on that trend. So I think the way Teradata has handled the acquisition is very, very nice. It's giving us a lot of autonomy and giving us additional resources. We are scaling out our engineering team quite dramatically. So I think frankly we can have a bigger impact on the big data market now that we are part of Teradata than being outside alone. So it's definitely not slowed us down.
So, pardon my ignorance, but long time ago I heard Teradata was, when they did search, they used to send out over 8 different disks or whatever, right? Their search was different than everybody else. Now, how does your architecture fit with their way of searching and?
Sure. So Teradata was the original MPP database. Right? So they were the first guys who figured out how to send out queries across 8 servers, or then it became 80 servers and then 800 servers. So they are a very good product and solution for things like enterprise data warehouse, where data is pretty structured, it's relational, and the queries are in SQL, which is the language for structured data, right? So for those, they are probably the best product in the market. We, on the other hand, play in the big data market space, where we define big data not just as a lot of relational data, but a lot of relational and multi-structured data, right? So multi-structured data could be like web pages, could be like tweet feeds, it could be like network packets, it could be cookies, graphs, even seismic readings from an oil and gas company. So data that has some structure in it, it may not happen to be relational. And for that we are a very good product. It doesn't fit into the traditional relational paradigm, and you cannot use SQL to query it. You have to use other technologies to analyze and query that data. So our emphasis is on rich queries, richer than SQL, on big diverse data, for which we are a really good architecture and product. So that's how the fit comes together.
So you started off writing the database itself, right, as a small team, and then you grew over the years where you're probably not as aware of the code today as you were when you started. What has been your experience, and do you miss some parts of it, and do you relish some of the other things that are now more important to you, and can you talk about it?
Yeah, sure. Although I'll be embarrassed to talk about that. So what happened was, initially I was the database leader, and I had a lot of code in the product. And then my team, which grew in the database side, they came around and systematically they have removed all my lines of code. So suddenly I don't have any line of code, because they say it's not up to our standards. So it is I eat humble pie whenever I think about that. given that I have a PhD in databases. But on the other side, I think I've learned so much outside of computer science that it's fascinating. It's just fascinating, right? I never had the opportunity to learn these things, and suddenly I'm learning all these things, and as long as I'm learning, I'm having fun. But I miss the simplicity of computer science problems. They are simple. They can be solved.
This MapReduce which Google has patented, that is core of the things which you people use in your unstructured data handling. And Teradata itself is working on MapReduce. So is that in any way conflicting interest or something like that?
Yes, so that's a very interesting question. So we implemented MapReduce because we realized very quickly that it will become the de facto standard as a language that a lot of companies will do, right? So we were very interested in the MapReduce paradigm from how people structure their programs and write their queries. So it's like a language interface to us. But the internals of the product are completely different from what Google has implemented. So our implementation is designed very elegantly, and in fact we have a patent on that, which we call SQL MR. So we have a patent on SQL MR that got awarded earlier this year. So we are developing on that new design, that new theme, and I think it will hold us in good stead for the years to come. So Teradata is working on integrating with Hadoop and other sources of MapReduce. They are working on integrating with us. So I think that's the nature of their integration work. As a connector, not so much as building it into their product.
Mike, I have a question for you. On SQL MR, on MapReduce, did you implement MapReduce? I remember the time when you implemented it. I was at the board. You gave me the initial demos. I remember that very clearly. Now, did you implement it because there was some customers who were asking for it, or was it because you forecasted and you saw that there would be a trend and there would be a need for it? Was there an explicit stated customer need, or were you sort of projecting out?
Yeah, actually there was no customer need for SQL MR. Absolutely none, right? So in fact, we projected out and we realized that this will become a good interface for us to have as we go build a new platform. But no customer wanted SQL MR. The only people who knew about MapReduce were the guys who were doing it themselves, like Google, Yahoo, and Facebook. They were building their own engines for MapReduce. Everybody else, we had to educate to them about what MapReduce is and why it is significant. So we had to spend a lot of time actually marketing the product that we had already built.
So considering that big data kind of has become like a black art today, so what do you think needs to happen in the market to sort of commoditize and bring it to the masses, where SQL is today, for example?
So I think big data is a fascinating market, right? Big data, there are multiple problems to be solved in the big data market. Very large number of problems to be solved. So I think there is a significant trend with Hadoop about making big data technologies accessible to a lot of technology savvy companies. There are a lot of independent startups that are taking a slice of the big data market by building a custom engine for graphs, a custom engine for key value stores. So this the sheer diversity of big data. There is a lot of product development to be happened. Now, having said that, I don't think big data. The time is right now to commoditize big data, because the product designs and the product solution architectures are still being worked out. And you can only commoditize an invention when the invention has solidified and people know how to use that invention, and then you can go out and deliver it at a lower cost. I think we are still in the invention phase, and solutions will sink or swim based on how good that invention is, right? So until that invention has stabilized and the market has rallied around that, this is the right thing to do, I think commoditization will be pretty hard.
What are like the top 3 things you see that have to happen in the marketplace for it to become mainstream?
I think somebody should come out and say, here's a blueprint or a handbook of how to manage your big data assets. I think a lot of customers are just hungry for education. Right? They know, they have a sense that it is important. So the first thing that I would say is a lot of education has to happen, and popularization of architectures. The second thing that I think should happen is I think people should sit down and standardize the MapReduce language. They might not accept the internals, the architectures and so on, but people should sit down and say this is how MapReduce interfaces will look like so that other people can build on that stable platform. Right now the APIs themselves are changing quite a bit, and that's not good. So the second thing is some standardization should happen. And the third thing I think is I think a lot of mainstream enterprises have to come out and say this is how we are using MapReduce to popularize the acceptance of these big data technologies in a retail store, in an insurance company, in a financial services company. I think all the examples that you hear today or are popular today are all about internet technology savvy companies who's solving some simple problems with MapReduce. You know, they're really solving simple problems with the technologies that they have. So I think those lighthouse wins have to happen, and they will happen. You know, we are enabling some of these lighthouse wins. We know that they are going to happen pretty soon. So I think all the forces are going in the right direction.
One question for Anand. Since you were involved in the company right from day one, so how did you see the initial product vision? What, when Mayank came to you and showed you the proto to the time it was sold to Teradata?
It actually changed, and it changed with the market, and and it was an evolution that had happened. When we first spoke, right, it was all about a new kind of hardware architecture that had come around, which was this commodity hardware with gigabit internet, Ethernet, and so on. That was the new hardware, and it was all about price performance. It was, can we use this new hardware architecture to do what was being done, which is enterprise data warehousing, with a better price performance than was available. So that was the early promise, right? It was, what we realized soon, maybe 2 years into the company, was that, and we actually got customers for this initial value proposition. What we realized after 2 years is that value proposition it's a crowded market, and there were plenty of players in that market, and there were plenty of big players in that market. So we sort of needed to find a value proposition that moved us up the value chain, right? And that's when we realized, look, it's not just about doing the same thing cheaper, but enabling new things, right? And the new things are these more sophisticated queries. It's not SQL queries anymore. It's queries that cannot be expressed in SQL, queries that can be expressed only through MapReduce. These kinds of more sophisticated and richer queries on the big data, and that became the more complex analysis, and that became the new value proposition in the later days of the company, and led in fact to the acquisition. So I think there was, Mike, do you agree with me?
I agree with you. Let's say halfway through. I think one thing that really helped us was the customer-driven development that we talked about that allowed us to adapt, right? And I think that's what Anand is speaking towards, that we had a trajectory where we could lead the market on commodity hardware, and then we were able to adapt when we said, okay, now the timing looks right, let's go in a different direction. But in the very beginning, I think Tasso had drawn a pretty nice chart as part of our conversations, where our thought was that we'll build this big data platform on which you can run different kinds of applications. At that point, we were calling it applications, right? And I remember we went and talked to a VC about saying we want to build a big data platform, and he laughed at us and he said, everybody wants to build a platform, right? And nobody has succeeded in building a platform except Oracle and Microsoft. So he practically laughed us out of the room. So that is when we stopped calling it a platform. and we said, look, we have to keep the architecture open and extensible, so that when the timing is right, we'll branch out and do these other things. So to that extent, we were eagerly looking out for that diversion, because we knew that it would happen sooner or later. And then when it happened, we were not tied in this long product development cycle, so we could take it. And as Anand mentioned, that's how it played out.
Hi, my name is Satyam. I work in a company where we do data management in process industries, real-time data, and for utility companies, monitoring the grids and energy usage and stuff. So my question is, do you see either Astrodata or Teradata being part of that industry space in terms of doing big data analytics, energy management, and so forth?
I think there are some interesting applications there. I have personally not explored them, but I think it would be interesting to be in that kind of space.
Hi, I'm Ramanan. I have two questions actually. One is for Mayank and one is for Anand. The question to you, Mayank, is during the course of this performance characterization of your development, the SQL MR, have you ever come across as memory being the bottleneck in your infrastructure, or is it always been the I/O throughput and your networking bandwidth? It's server memory that you have on a per server. Has that ever been a bottleneck in your performance analysis?
Yes, for certain clients, certain kinds of analysis, we find that the processor is waiting for the memory to deliver quite a bit. There are these certain class of applications where you can cache a lot of data and just go crunch them for higher value. So yes, we've seen that happen.
And the second question is for Anand. You mentioned briefly that there are solid-state devices could be very well used for problems like in-memory databases and even other stuff. So do you know of any such deployment which marries the two technologies, solid-state devices as a backup store instead of the regular traditional hard disk for databases?
So I don't think of solid state as a replacement for main memory. Clearly, it's much slower than main memory, right? But it's much faster than disk.
Exactly.
But there are some kind of applications for which solid state disks are well suited. For example, caching applications are a very obvious example, right? So at my most recent company, Cosmics, and now at Walmart Labs, we build really large caches that cache search results, for instance, and they live in solid state disks. So when a new search comes in, we can very quickly look in solid state disks, and it's much faster than. So there are certain applications like that I think are well suited for solid state disks, like caching, that will go to solid state disks. I don't know how good they are for query processing, or whether some company has figured out how to combine a 3-level memory hierarchy and do query processing. I don't know about that. Might know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll probably take my question. As you know, customer-driven development is great, but obviously as an entrepreneur, initially you're running a lot of experiments. I call this the push versus pull syndrome, where you're basically building to something and then testing the market. So, but there's certain principles you use where you end up saying, okay, if for a couple of months I find that customers are not pulling, I'm basically doing something, going to do something different with the product, and keep moving along.
So I think Anand will have greater insights, because remember, we were enterprise software and it's very expensive to run these experiments, right? But Anand, you were running a consumer, in both your companies you were running a consumer service. So how frequently did you put features out and experiment in?
Well, actually, in the consumer internet, that's what we do, right? We put out new things every week or every day almost, and we do A/B testing to see what works and what doesn't. And in fact, it's interesting, right? In the consumer world, I think it's one of the few worlds where intuition and data can sort of work with each other in a very interesting fashion. And this is what Steve Jobs says, right? It's building great product is not all about logic; it's also about intuition. The problem problem with intuition is you never know when you're right, right? So that's, if you're right, you're spectacularly right, but if you're wrong, you can be spectacularly wrong too. So the consumer world is, fortunately today, the consumer internet is one of those areas where intuition and data can come together, because you can have intuition, you can quickly test it out with a small fraction of traffic and see if it works. And you can keep testing new intuitions every day, right? And the way you come up with these intuitions need not be data-driven at all, right? They can be completely intuitive or completely right brain, whatever it is, but then you test it in a very data-driven fashion to see if it works or not. Unfortunately, for the kind of enterprise products that Ash Data was building, that was a much harder thing to do. I don't know how enterprise and intuition meet. I think that will be an interesting, somebody maybe will figure that out. That will be an interesting thing.
Yeah, the answer to the previous question, somebody asked about the three-tier architecture. There are a number of companies. One is the Dell EqualLogic and Nimble Storage and Isilon. They're hot companies right now because they're all taking advantage of the economies in all three spaces, memory and as well as solid-state memory and the hard disk, typical hard disk. Okay, my question to you is, you said you had a tough time raising Series B, right? I mean, you had Doug Leon and Anand on the board. Didn't you plan that ahead of time, and did you have any backup plan to see through the whole thing?
So we had planned for it in that our slides and our metrics and all the other things were worked out. We prepared pretty well. I think it was pretty hard to know that exact week of our first appointments, the Dow is going to crash so much, right? It was.
So your search for money was only limited to Silicon Valley or all over the globe, or only here and elsewhere? Or?
I think we were only in Silicon Valley. Luckily for us, Anand and Doug had pretty good connections to a lot of VCs. So we were able to be here.
Thank you.
So one of the posts, actually I was reading, so I'm going to take some stuff from the past. So you had mentioned that, this is in 2005. You said you develop your ideas usually in isolation first before, so that, sometimes you get just, people just give advice without understanding what you're talking about. Do you remember that post?
I don't remember it.
Okay. Someone wrote a post, and I see Mayank, Bawa, October 13, 2005. I just did a Google. Thanks to Google, you can search everything about everyone.
Yeah, I remember that.
So what the question is, so in fact, you said great post. I don't have the post about, but what it was mostly with what's the benefit of being open with ideas when you're trying to develop, you start your company. So whether you should go and talk to tons of people, and how do you figure out whether it's you're getting the right advice or feedback. And so you mentioned that you try to exercise a bit of moderation. One is prefer to develop your idea in isolation first before going out and talking, so that you won't be caught saying a foolish thing. So, or it won't be tainted by feedback from well-meaning but less knowing persons, right?
Yeah.
So, and then
Yeah, I remember now.
So the question now I have is going back like 5 years later, right? That's kind of what in the beginning, because I also see that with many, and even me also being first time when you try to start something, used to be very worried about, okay, I have an NDA signed from someone, he's going to steal my idea, and more as you grow out, I don't even care. I feel like, they're not going to be as passionate as you are about what you are trying to do, so I usually doubt anyone is going to copy unless they're already doing some work in that. So anyways, I just wanted to get your perspective, whether anything had changed in your thinking from that time in 2005 to after, having been through 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. It's great to voice ideas and get feedback. There's no point in secrecy and doing NDAs, because I really think at that point, things are being formulated. So it is pretty good to trust yourself and your intuition that you have an insight that other people don't have. They can copy the specific feature you're talking about, but it's hard to copy a whole trajectory or an intuition about the market. So I think it's pretty good to go talk and get feedback. Completely agree.
So a little bit of change in thinking, I guess.
I guess so. I guess so.
I think this is something that happens as you grow up. When I was starting out, I was similarly paranoid, and as you get experience, you realize that look, it's the doing that matters, not the talking, and you might as well get as much feedback as possible.
Any other questions from the audience?
So actually, so I have a question.
Yes.
So there is something of an explosion happening with personal data as well. Like for example, each of us carry like 8 MB cameras in our pockets, and we record a lot of our like experiences and so on and so forth. And same with the documents that we collect and stuff like that, right? So do you see any opportunity there in terms of like organizing that and like making sense of all the, I mean like typically most of us have like tens of gigabits of data or probably more. So do you think, I mean these used to be the data that enterprises used to carry, I mean do you see any opportunity there?
No, I absolutely see opportunity there. Now exactly what form that takes, I don't know, but I've spoken to at least one or maybe two startups that are talking about doing things in this space. I don't want to talk too much because I don't want to talk about what they're doing, but there seems to be some activity in the space.
One last thing. Anand, since you run an incubator of sorts, I don't know how many companies you have launched from that incubator.
Hold on.
Don't you think speed is the essence of any of these companies or technologies, especially in the technologies, internet technologies? I mean, since you run an incubator, you probably have a lot of experience and also talking to a lot of students at Stanford and everything. The reason I'm getting at that is because you see money is important, right? Any startup and everything you can scale, and of course you could be wrong and everything, but like what he went through, raising money in chunks and pieces and bits and pieces. Do you think he would have been better off raising lots of money at the upfront?
No, I don't. I actually don't think that it's better to raise a lot of money up front. I think there's a natural way these ideas progress, and having more money and throwing more resources at something is usually not the best way to solve it, right? I think as they were probably the most productive when there were three of them sitting in Tasso's dorm. Then they were probably pretty productive when they were still 8 people. But when the team grows, there's all kinds of communication overhead and all kinds of other things start happening. So I think you're fastest and you can do experiments and you can learn quickly when you're small, right? So it's not having more money and more resources is not always a good thing when you're exploring a space quickly. I don't think it's you should be, Silicon Valley is a place that learns, right, from success and from failure, and it shouldn't be and then the model that has emerged through all this learning and all this evolution is this model where initially companies get a small round of funding, they figure out what they're doing, and then they get large rounds of funding, and this is an evolutionary stable model, it looks like, and the reason for that must be that there's some optimality about it. And there are well-documented cases of companies that raise huge amounts of money, $50 million or something, before they flesh out the idea, and then they flop miserably, right? So there are, those cases are well documented as well, right? So there must be some evolutionary stability to this model, I think, that we are in.
Any other questions?
Hey guys, my name is Rohan. I'm a math PhD student on leave, and I was just wondering, what does a PhD do for you as an entrepreneur, both from a conceptual standpoint and maybe from a networking standpoint?
So I would say 3 things, right? First is, I think it gives a lot of credibility when you go out and talk. I think people look at the PhD tag and believe in you for some reason. The second thing I think is what I found is that the process of going through a PhD helped me. I could see some parallels in the business side, where it taught me how to present research papers and do these presentations and write reports, communicating in a better manner to other people. Although I think PhD is an expensive thing to do that, to just learn that. but it helped out. And the third thing I think it hurt me was that I had to struggle to not look for the optimal solution and just get it done. So I think the PhD hindered me in that sense, because often I would find myself thinking, this is not an elegant solution, let me find another elegant solution. So I think those were three practical aspects.
I did not have a PhD when I did my first company. In fact, I dropped out of my PhD. I took a leave of absence to do my first company. So I can't speak, for me it was, look, if I didn't make this company successful, I would go back to doing the PhD. So, so, but seriously, you going through the process, and which I eventually did anyway. But the thing that for me that was most interesting out of the process, even though I did not get my PhD before I started my company, was the ability to rigorously think about something, examine it, look at it from all points of view, criticize it, and defend it from in front of a bunch of people. I think that's a good skill to have that you pick up in this process, and I think that I would highlight that as very important. The other thing that I think is hugely important that Mayank did not talk about is if you're fortunate enough to be doing a PhD in a place like Stanford, you build a huge bunch of contacts, and those actually come in very handy, as you saw in his story, and that happened in my case as well. You find co-founders, which is probably the most important thing an entrepreneur can find. You find when you're in the PhD program, you find people who can introduce you to companies, you find various things. The network is very important.
Yeah, hi. So you were just talking about how the company was most efficient when there was just possibly 3 of them working out of the dorm room, right? But obviously, the goal of every company is to grow and expand. So were there any kind of rules that you followed that helped balance growth versus efficiency?
So are you addressing the question to Anand?
Well, either of you, whoever wants to answer it.
Right, so one rule of thumb that we had is, typically when we saw a set of people, too busy jumping from one project to the other, there was a clear symptom that that team is understaffed, right? Because they have to do context switching just to keep pace with what is happening, and so clearly they want to grow. Now that is a lagging indicator that scale is needed, right? And then there are good rules of thumb you can build to anticipate leading indicators of when scale is a must, and not having a leading indicator will really hurt you, because hiring the right person needs 3 months, and then ramping him up takes another couple of months. So having a good set of leading indicators really helps, and it's very context dependent depending on the projects that team is doing. So over time, we learn to understand these leading and lagging indicators.
One of the things that I have found, and we implement at my company, is this idea of small teams. Where we take work and we divide it into small enough pieces so that no team, we call these 2 pizza teams, and the name came from Amazon. No team is so big. Every team should be capable of being fed on 2 large pizzas, right? So that's kind of the rule, which means depending on appetites, somewhere between 4 to 8 people, right? So there are some large people, so they can have only 4 people on their team. So so it depends on the so no more than 8 people on a team, and the reason for this is when you have a small enough team, everybody can talk to everybody, and this kind of n-squared communication is actually a feasible model. N-squared doesn't work when n becomes larger than 10, right? And then you need n-log n communication models, which are hierarchical in nature, which you don't want, right? So to sort of facilitate n-squared communication, you have to keep your teams very small. Definitely when you see a team hit a size of 10, we split it into 2 teams of size 5 at that point. And we define clear interfaces between the teams. And then we have clear metrics for each team, so that each team has a clear charter and clear metrics, and so it acts almost like its own startup and has a lot of autonomy. And it sort of, we measure the metrics on a monthly basis, so every team has to sort of show that it's making progress on its metrics. So this way we're sort of able to keep teams really small and allow them to act like startups, even as we scale the organization. So this is something that I found works well for certain kinds of companies and certain kinds of products.
Any last question from the audience? Okay, so one question for both of you. The parting question is, let's say you're starting your own new startup. For some of those sitting in the audience who probably are aspiring or who are looking to do their second or third or whatever. So what would you do today in terms of from the trends and opportunities for the audience, for each of you?
You know, I firmly believe in this in the big data thing that we've been talking about, and it's you know, the best quote I've heard about this still is from Eric Schmidt, right? And he said every 2 days